It's time for The Verdict. The Verdict is a lively discussion of current events and legal issues pertinent to Oklahomans. The Verdict is hosted by Kent Myers and Mick Cornett. It's time for The Verdict.
And welcome once again to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett, and I am joined, as always, by one of Oklahoma's top legal experts, Kent Myers. Kent, what do we have today?
We have an issue today that we're going to talk about, I think, that will really qualify as what you sometimes characterize as our lively discussions. We're going to have two guests on today that take differing positions on whether or not the Labor Commissioner and the Insurance Commissioner should be appointed positions rather than elective positions. We're going to have the Labor Commissioner, Brenda Reneau Wynn, and State Representative John Trebilcock from Tulsa join us in just a few minutes and discuss this issue. It's really an issue of governance. How should the issues that are handled by each of these departments be managed? Should it be managed by the vote of the people, selecting the leader of the Labor Department or the Insurance Department, or should it be done by the governor, who under the proposition that will be pending this session will appoint these people? So we'll see.
It should be fascinating. In Oklahoma, voters statewide determine who will serve as Insurance Commissioner, but should that be an appointed position? Also the Labor Commissioner. It's all coming up next on The Verdict. And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, who's going to introduce our guests.
We are pleased to welcome back to The Verdict for her third visit the Honorable Brenda Reneau Wynn, the Labor Commissioner of the state of Oklahoma. Ms. Wynn is a native of Fort Gibson, Oklahoma. She is the first female Labor Commissioner in the state of Oklahoma and has been elected to that position 3 times. Correspondingly, this is her third appearance on The Verdict. Our viewers are very familiar with having Ms. Wynn on, and thank you so much for coming back.
My pleasure. Thank you.
On my right is a young man who's making his first appearance on The Verdict, John Trebilcock, a Republican from District 98 in the House of Representatives. John likewise is a native Oklahoman, having grown up in the Tulsa area. He obtained his BA degree from Oklahoma State University and was student body president while he was there. His law degree from the University of Tulsa he obtained. He's in private law practice in Tulsa with the Hall Estel firm, I believe it is, in Tulsa. And John, we're pleased you drive down here from Tulsa to join us on The Verdict. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Let me start with you, John, or let me first of all, rather, bring up a graphic that I want to look at. We want to trace the Labor Commissioner's elective or appointive history in Oklahoma because it is interesting. From statehood until 1975, the Labor Commissioner was an elected position. Then in 1975, at a special election, I believe, it was changed to an appointive position by a vote tally, is what those numbers are, 156,000 to 91,000. And that remained the case until 1988. Then in 1988, it was changed to back by the electorate to an elective position, and it remains that today. And note the vote tally in 1988 at a general election was 746,000 in favor of making it elective to 309 making it appointive. So insofar as the Insurance Commissioner is concerned, it's been an elective position since anybody can remember. John, let me ask you, what is your reason for you and Representative Boren proposing that the Constitution be amended to change both Labor and the Insurance Commissioner to an appointive position?
Well, one of the things I've always thought in Oklahoma we needed was a stronger governor
And I do think that the governor should be able to appoint his or her selection for insurance commissioner or labor commissioner and other positions as well, so that their vision of what Oklahoma should be can be enacted. It's the one person all Oklahomans vote on, and they're going to hold him or her accountable for the success of this state. And I simply think that strengthening our governor in this and several other areas is something that will help move Oklahoma forward.
Well, John, 15 years ago, voters went to the polls and by an overwhelming margin chose the system we have now. So why should we change it?
Well, I don't know the particulars of what happened in 1988. I was still in high school, I think, in 10th grade. But it's one of the neat things about being in the legislature is you have an idea, you can put it forward onto the public into the public arena for debate. And Representative Bourne and I share this idea that we need to strengthen the governor's office, and we think that 15 years later it's time to have a debate and see if the people of Oklahoma agree.
Brenda, what do you think?
I think democracy is still popular in the heartland. I think to visit twice before visited subject like this is a waste of taxpayer time and money and resources. When you think about what the legislature is supposed to do and what control they have over the economy in the state of Oklahoma, you think about workers' compensation costs. We have trouble there. We need health care concerns addressed. There are so many things in government that the legislature ought to be looking at instead of revisiting something like this. Obviously, I don't like it. There was a time, though, I thought about it myself, and the reason I thought about it was that the Labor Commissioner's office, in particular, had been one that had been kind of tossed around and used for political purposes, and the majority of folks out there that have issues before the Labor Department remember a time when it was run by labor union bosses, and when we took that over in 1995, I changed that. I changed it. And I think one of the reasons, actually this is the first time I've heard that this was the reason to make the governor's office stronger. Too bad you didn't do that under Governor Keating. I mean, he probably would have liked that better. But,
I've only been in the legislature 1 year.
Well, and see, if you had more history, then you'd know that this had already been done twice.
Right to work was voted on twice, too, and we agree that that's a great thing for Oklahoma.
You're asking for it to be voted on, for a third time. And, it's just not an issue right now. It's not something that's important to the overall economy of the state. It's not something that's going to, I think I heard one of the lawmakers say that one of the reasons was to restore integrity to state government. Well, I've campaigned in every county in the state of Oklahoma, and if there's any perceived lack of integrity in the part of government by the people, it's at the legislature itself. It's not with any particular statewide elected official. So I think it's disingenuous. I think there are some underlying reasons and political reasons and personal reasons why this is being done. And there's no economical benefit to the state whatsoever to invest any resources in something like this right now.
John, I'm sorry, go ahead.
As to the resources, I mean, this is going to be, if we're successful in the general election ballot, I don't know, it would cost the extra ink to print another paragraph to put into this. I agree there are more important issues than this. I mean, workers' comp reform, tort reform, we probably share the same vision and values in those areas. We're going to disagree on this issue, obviously, but this isn't about personalities. It's not about politics. It's about what I think is good policy. We're just putting this idea out there, and we'll see what happens.
I'm so glad you said that. Let's focus on the policy a minute. You have been a high school teacher, and you've taught 9th and 10th grade, and you've taught government and something else. I've forgotten.
History.
History. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I've forgotten my history. I'm doomed to repeat it, I guess. You, I'm sure, have taught your students that Oklahoma's Constitution and its beginnings were based upon a populist tradition. Yes. Isn't it furtherance of the populist tradition to let the population vote on things rather than have them be appointed?
Well, our populist tradition has given us some good things and what I would consider some not so good things. The initiative petition, the referendum, that come out of the populist tradition, I think, are positives. Having a weak executive, which is also one of the major goals of the populists, I think is something whose time has passed. I think we do need to strengthen the governor. Their goal was to create a very, very weak executive, and our Constitution, I think we need to revisit what is in our Constitution. It's one of the longest in the country. Teddy Roosevelt considered it one of the worst at the time that Oklahoma became a state. We even, as many political junkies and historians know, even have the flashpoint of kerosene in our state constitution. Our Constitution is one of the major barriers.
I missed something there. What's the flashpoint of kerosene?
It's the amount of heat that you can apply to kerosene before it would explode, basically. They were afraid of the big railroad companies selling cheap kerosene. They put that in the Constitution. Something you would consider to be appropriate for a statute is in our state constitution. So not everything that comes out of the populist tradition is a plus.
Well, let me get us to a break. Turn up the kerosene lamp and stick with us. We're visiting with State Labor Commissioner Brenda Reneau Wynn and State Representative John Trebilcock, and you're watching The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers back on The Verdict. This week's guests are State Labor Commissioner Brenda Reneau Wynn and State Representative John Trebilcock. We're discussing the idea of making the role of State Labor Commissioner and State Insurance Commissioner an appointed position instead of an elected position. Brenda, we've kind of danced around the integrity issue, but Representative Boren seems to be implying that there's a conflict of interest because the people that tend to support people that run for insurance commissioner or labor commissioner tend to be the same people that are ultimately governed by that position. How do you respond?
Well, that's pretty easy to respond to. The Labor Department doesn't regulate, per se, any particular industry more than another. In fact, mainly all we do is make sure that folks have workers' comp insurance and take wage claims. As far as any regulation, there just really isn't that much. Now, the insurance commissioner has a lot of regulation. I can't disagree with that. We don't have the ability to shut people down, you know, if or yank their license if we get in the mood to do that. So I can only speak to what, you know, it really does not apply at the Labor Department. I can see that it would apply in some other offices.
Let me ask you to just venture an opinion. Would you support this bill if it were limited to the insurance commissioner and not the labor commissioner?
No, and the reason is because it's a constitutional issue, and you know, I admire the lawmakers' interest in the Constitution, but you know, I haven't heard you say anything about our long overdue constitutional convention. And when were we supposed to have that last? 20 years ago?
Several years ago, and on the House floor, I've been supportive of Representative John Smallgo of Owasso, who has, this is one of his personal issues. The Constitution mandates that we send to a vote of the people whether or not we have a constitutional convention. That hasn't happened, and needs to.
And that is exactly where these constitutional issues ought to be addressed. All of these issues can be addressed if we would have that constitutional convention.
Well, it's not a convention that's mandated. You send to a vote of the people whether or not they want to have a convention.
Well, and it hasn't been done. By law, it's supposed to be done.
You're right.
So I don't know who's in violation of the law there, but this is just not an issue that needs to be readdressed. Like you showed before, we're a populist state. This has been voted on twice before. I'm not in favor of it because the people have spoken. I'm a constitutionalist as well, and when the people speak, I listen, and they have spoken on this, and I believe in, I started to say earlier, I had looked at one time at what if this office literally was dismantled, and all of the services and programs were placed at other state agencies. In doing that, we would lose some of the special personal attention that we're able to pay to people with our Safety Pays program. That's my special pet project. But the finance director at the time showed me how that's how larger government, how functions and programs and services actually are less efficient under the umbrella of larger agencies, and in empowering these agencies to become larger and larger with more and more programs and services is not an more efficient way to do government. So I set that aside. I also thought about exactly what he's talking about here today. What if this were an appointed position? And had I not, from personal experience, and I've written about this, in the position that I'm in as an elected official, I have the ability to be independent in my administration of the Labor Department. I don't have any particular governor. I don't have a governor, but I also don't have any particular industry telling me what to do. And I've been in office long enough that I've had lawmakers who have asked me to hire their relatives, who have dressed me down in committee for, they didn't agree with my politics, who've reduced my budget because I wouldn't do certain things that they wanted done. And if I had been appointed, like some other people are in state government, you really almost have no other choice but to do what they tell you to do. When you've been appointed by someone, you jump when they tell you to jump.
Let me jump in here and ask John, I think there's a tendency to look at maybe that this is being brought up now because it's a personal attack on the current labor commissioner or the current insurance commissioner. Is that the case?
It is not the case. And as I've said, this is something I've thought for a long time. My reasoning for including the labor commissioner isn't so much the campaign contributions. It's that, to me, it seems more like an administrative job that should be appointed by the governor. And we just disagree. I think the governor should have more input as to how the labor department is run, whether or not it's the current governor or future governors. As far as the campaign contributions, I mean, I've only been in politics a year now. I know politicians have to raise money. But when they're only raising money from one sector, one business, I think that's a conflict of interest. Now, the counter-argument to that is, of course, the governor takes campaign contributions too, but they're taking them from across the board and both sides, and so I think that...
As well as I am. I don't have any particular group that contributes to me. A large portion of the folks that contribute to my campaign are retirees.
Our time has moved on way too quickly. Brenda, you want to take 20 seconds to kind of wrap up your thoughts here?
I don't think it's a good idea to take away the people's right to vote. They've spoken on this issue twice in the past. Constitutional issues can be addressed at the Constitutional Convention, which is long overdue. I think people still in the heartland, especially, and yes, we are a populous state, I just think they reserve the sacredness of their vote at the poll for their elected leaders.
Let me give John a chance to respond. Final word from you, John.
Well, I'd just like to stress again that Representative Bourne and I are not making personal attacks. This is about policy, not personalities. It's a constitutional reform we think would strengthen the governor's office, which would then help him or her push Oklahoma forward.
All right, we're going to wrap it up there. I want to thank both of you for coming on. State Labor Commissioner Brenda Reneau Wynn.
You're welcome.
And State Representative John Trebilcock.
Thank you.
We'll be back with a few final thoughts in a minute.
You close it up.
Okay.
I'm going to do a little bit.
We are back to wrap up another edition of The Verdict. A really good show.
Was a good show. It's an interesting issue. If the legislature should see fit to pass this bill, making these two, or submitting to a vote of the people, making these two positions appointed rather than elective. It is a reasonable expectation that it would hit the ballot in November, about 11 months from now, and our viewers may have a chance to vote on it. On the other hand, it's got several hurdles to get over before that happens. But Mick, this is a special show for another reason. This is our last show before Christmas, and I promised our guests that we would wish Merry Christmas to Brenda Reneau Wynn's mom, Margie. Merry Christmas, Margie, and to John Trebilcock's niece, Amber. Merry Christmas, Amber. And I'd like to wish you and your family and everybody at KSBI from the Myers family Merry Christmas, and we hope everybody has a great holiday.
Indeed. Thank you, Kent. Good show. Thanks again to our guests, State Representative John Trebilcock and State Labor Commissioner Brenda Reneau Wynn. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you next time on The Verdict.